Welcome back to another Wednesday, Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. I'm Bob Bertucci, and I'm also joined by fellow Master Coaches Mick Haley. And we're excited about today's show. Our guest today is Cassidy Lichtman, all right, with Athletes Unlimited. And, Cassidy, I got to tell you this before we actually get started into the questions. I went out to dinner with my wife the other night at Longhorn Steakhouse, and we had to wait a few minutes before we actually got seated. So we went over to the bar, and as we were sitting at the bar, sure enough, on the TV was Athletes Unlimited. I was so excited to actually see the game in a commercial establishment, and it was kind of a neat thing. Well, of course, some other dingbat decides he's gonna change the channel. All right, ends up changing it to the Braves game because he was from Atlanta. Well, I couldn't argue too much because my wife's a Phillies fan, so I ended up losing that battle. But I thought it was great that we actually had the game, on in a commercial establishment. So you're obviously getting some good television coverage already.
Yeah, I mean that was the huge thing about signing the deal with ESPN. I think our first two seasons we were on national TV. We were on CBS Sports, Fox Sports for some of our games, Bally's. But I think ESPN plays everywhere. They're playing in bars and restaurants. When I'm in my apartment building and working out in the gym, they're on there. And so I think especially for volleyball, for a lot of women's sports, you need to get those kind of organic viewers just in any way that you can. And so being on a big TV channel like that is huge for us as Athletes Unlimited, and then also just for volleyball.
Well, our topic today was really Athletes Unlimited, the third season. I don't know if everyone knows you're actually going into your third season, so we want to talk a little bit about get a little historical perspective about Athletes Unlimited and how did it come about, and who was the brains and the creator of Athletes Unlimited.
Yeah, so our founders are John Patricof and Jonathan Soros. And so John Patricof was in probably 2018, 2019 running NYCFC, the men's soccer team in New York. He had previously run Tribeca and some other businesses. Jonathan Soros was an investor. And so John felt like there was a really big opportunity in women's sports and wanted to get into that. Approached Jonathan with the idea. And Jonathan thought, that sounds great. I want to do it. But what if we started our own thing as opposed to investing in a current WNBA team or NWSL team? And so when they thought about kind of the model and how they wanted to do it, they came up with this really kind of new innovative structure for the league that takes into account a lot of the challenges and the obstacles that sports like volleyball or women's sports face as they're just kind of getting up and running. And also looks at where's the next generation of fans going and how are they watching sports. And so they started in softball. Actually, we have 4 different sports in AU. So it's softball, volleyball, lacrosse, and basketball. And so softball started in 2020 and volleyball followed shortly thereafter in 2021. And they had met with Karch and Jordan Larson and some other members of the U.S. national team to just kind of get a feel for the landscape. And started in 2021, and now we're going into our third season.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the structure of AU, and you refer to it as AU, and we have just started doing that ourselves. As we do different planning meetings, instead of going through the whole Athletes Unlimited thing that we continually mess up between myself and Mick.
Actually, so me is the one that messes it up all the time.
So AU seems to be where we're falling out. But tell us a little bit about the league and the role of the league and how players are picked for the league. And then
So we have 44 athletes for each season. We bring them all to one city, and we play essentially a 5-week competition schedule. And so they're there for about a week and a half of preseason, 5 weeks of competition. And each week our teams change. So we have a leaderboard that's running kind of like you would see in golf or F1 or fantasy sports. where each of our players is getting points based on every time their team wins a match or a set, their own individual performance, and some MVP voting. And so that leaderboard is shifting at every point during every game. And each week, the top 4 on the leaderboard are the captains. They get to select their teams for the next week. So there's a few different reasons for that model. One is there's a lot of expenses in starting up a league with teams in different cities. And so you can have different investor groups that can cover that. We chose a more kind of centralized model that takes away the travel and kind of building up the different clubs and puts them all in one place. And one of the other insights that it was based on was the idea that the kind of current and future sports fan is really geared more on the individual athletes. And so there are fewer now sort of Laker fans or Mets fans, and there's more, LeBron James fans following their, favorite athletes from team to team. And so the players, we have 5 players from our league that are part of what we call the player executive committee. And they're really kind of a leadership group, and they're involved in pretty much all the decisions that are made about the league and the athletes. And they're also responsible, as the lead on kind of recruiting for the following season. So I was on the player executive committee, we call it the PEC, for the first 2 seasons, and then transitioned into a full-time job with AU as the director of volleyball. And so now I work with the PEC on, recruiting the athletes for the next season and trying to get, some of the best coming out of college, but also the international stars and, ones who have been playing pro for a long time.
So that was one of my questions I was going to ask you, what your role was right now with AU. So it's transitioned from being a player rep and being a player to this director position?
Yeah. So I'm now the director of volleyball. And so essentially kind of leading all of the operations on volleyball. And so our company, like I said, goes across 4 sports. And so we have, the marketing department, the partnerships department, ticketing, all of that goes across sports, but I'm really responsible for anything that happens in volleyball and kind of tracking that. So, anything that goes on with our season is at least I'm kind of touching it.
So Mick and I have talked a lot about the scoring, and we've of course had differing opinions, but it sounds like you mentioned, or you at least touched on, the fact that the part of the reason for this is that people are more interested in the individual players. Can you explain the scoring and how it works and how it ties into that idea you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I think for the traditional volleyball fan, it is a little bit of a mindset shift. Although we are, still playing volleyball, we still play to 25. We don't have any, crazy like 2-point plays or anything like that. But each player is also kind of getting their own individual points counted. And the way I like to think about it is, like I said, you get points for every set and match that your team wins. So every time you win a set, plus 40 points. If you win a match, plus 60 points. And you're also getting points if if I make a kill, I'm getting, plus 8. If I make an error, minus 12. So like the math aside of, none of us as players are counting up like, okay, it's plus 8, plus 4, but I think about it as you're getting points for how much your team wins and how much you help your team win. So, from probably the dawn of volleyball, we've been counting statistics, and you get a box score after every game. So we've already been kind of looking at all of these numbers. As coaches, obviously, you're tracking all of this. And now we're just seeing it getting put up onto this leaderboard. So we're seeing, this person actually makes a lot of errors. And yeah, they got some kills, but the errors are negating that. And so you're going to see that in the point levels. So to me, it's a really interesting way to look at kind of the value of a player to their team. And the most points that you can get are still the team win. So it still is the most valuable thing that you can do on the court. And so that's the leaderboard that's kind of shifting throughout the game. I would say as an athlete playing in it, you're not sitting there thinking, okay, I can't make this error because then I'm going to lose points most of the time. Maybe there are a couple athletes doing that, but you're trying to play good volleyball. And when you play good volleyball, you get more points. So in a way, it's just making it kind of more competitive and adding more urgency to each rally that's being played. And I think that's had a really kind of positive effect in a lot of ways on that like intensity of the game kind of going up. It feels like, playoff volleyball every night.
So you just started the season this last weekend, this third
Mhm.
season, and we were watching. It's a 3-set match. Team A wins the first 2 sets, and Team B wins the 3rd set, and they go crazy like they've won the match. And it was explained that the point differential, that they won the point differential. In other words, they scored more points than the other team scored in the 3 sets. Maybe you can talk about that just so we understand. I mean, you talked about points. We're getting points for everything. But how can they win the match if they lose 2 out of the 3 sets?
Yes. So this is different. And so we play 3 sets no matter what. So obviously college, you play 3 out of 5. Internationally, you play 3 out of 5. We play 3 matches a week. So playing 5 sets with 3 matches every week would be tough for our athletes. So some of it's just managing that load. That was part of the reason for the 3 sets only. But it's actually been really interesting. If you had told me at the beginning, we're going to count cumulative points as a, pure volleyball person, I would have been like, hang on a second, this is not how we play. But the effect that it's had, I think was, I wasn't anticipating. And so, yes, we play, our match winner is the winner of the cumulative score. So obviously if you were to win 25-23, 25-23, and then you lose, 25-16, you lose the match. And what that does for the play on the court is that it makes every point really, really important. As coaches, you're always trying to teach that urgency to your team. So, you're in set 1 and you're up by 5 and you're like, hey, keep pushing, the lead, or you're down by 5 and you're like, just close the gap. And the players really, talk about that and focus on it a lot more in our league because those points do matter. So it matters, even if you're down by 10, that you get a couple more, because in set 3, it's going to be important. And so I think it's been again, I didn't anticipate this, but I think it's been a really positive change. It's hard to do in any other setting in volleyball because you don't win points for winning a set or a match in most leagues. But it's really kind of raised the intensity of the competition to make the set really matters, the match really matters, and every point really matters. And so, I've played in leagues overseas, in Poland and China, like top level leagues, and there's a lot of games that don't matter. There's a lot of points that don't matter. And so, like, you're playing good volleyball, but only a certain percentage of the time are we really playing at our top level. And it really is, night in and night out at AU. It's like players are locked in and focused and competing for every single point that you're trying to get.
So your league would be an absolute wonderful thing for an old timer, Jim Coleman. He tried to produce through the FIVB. He tried to produce a scoring system that said you win the match. For instance, let's say you're ahead 16-12. Mm-hmm. So your real score would be 16 plus the differential, which would be 4. So you would actually have 20. And he wanted to play to 25 or 30 and keep that differential involved while they move forward. Pretty interesting. So yeah. How do you attach bonuses and things like that? Do the players get bonuses for these things? And give us an idea of what kind of bonus money they're getting for these kinds of things. What's their incentive here, other than just wanting to play?
Yeah. So the way the pay structure works is every player is getting a base salary. So they're, getting paid X amount for the season, a little bit based on their experience and their level. And then they get 2 types of bonuses. They get bonuses for each set and match that they win. And then they also get a bonus for where they finish on that leaderboard at the end of the season. So yeah, part of the reason that people are playing with intensity for every set is that they're getting paid for that. And you get a little bit more if you sweep. There's like an extra sweep bonus.
Oh, you get the broom out. Okay.
Yeah. So and it's really, really hard to sweep in this league. So they're getting bonuses for all of that. And so all in all, with our base salary, with the bonuses, the average that a player is going to make over the course of our, 5-6 week season is a little over 20,000. And that's the average. So obviously there are some that are less and some that are significantly more, that are finishing at the top and getting paid a higher base salary. But, it's so every time you get a set win, match win, And then every spot you move up on that leaderboard, that's a dollar amount that you get.
So along with that, then it becomes pretty powerful position to be one of these 5 people that you talked about selecting players. Who are these people that make the selections?
Yeah, so right now our player executive committee is Alicia Glass-Childress, Molly McCage. So Alicia, obviously Olympian, played at Penn State. Molly played at Texas. Erin Fairs came from Louisville. Taylor Bruns, Tegenroot, South Carolina, and Deja McClendon, also Penn State. So it's the 5 of them. It's shifted. So originally, Jordan Larson and I were both on the original player executive committee. And so, yeah, they're charged with really, looking at the roster and going, okay, how do we recruit for the next season? And have done a great job with that. I think our talent level this year is significantly higher than last year. And, we've seen that growth over the course of our 3 seasons now. And so, yeah, they're really leading it on that.
So they go out and issue invitations. The players obviously have to accept. You get your 44. Then do you come in and just all practice together for a week or 2, or how do you get comfortable with each other before you start competition?
Yeah, we have our preseason where we try to just put everybody in the same practice together, and so they're practicing kind of with and against everyone else. And by the time we have our first draft for our first team, people have a little bit of an idea of who they're most comfortable with. But it's only it's a week and a half preseason, so it's quick. But so we had 7-8 practices and also 2 scrimmages or 2 scrimmage days with 4 scrimmages total, so they all could play a couple matches before we started. So it's pretty fast, but I think they get to know pretty quickly, who they connect with, who they want to play next to. And obviously some of them have played together or against each other before. And then once we get into the weeks, they get to know each other pretty fast over the course of competition.
So before the league starts, though, it seems like nobody's played anybody. You've just had practice. Who chooses the first 4 teams?
So
how does that work?
Yeah, so the captains, now that we have a few seasons in our belt, the captains for week 1 are the 4 highest returning players from the season before. So like Betania de la Cruz was our champion last year from Dominican Republic, and so she'd be the captain for the top team coming into this season.
And they do kind of a draft? I mean, we're sitting around doing our fantasy football draft, and yes, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly like that. So yeah, we do a draft every so we play Friday, Sunday, Monday. So we draft on Tuesday, then they'll practice with their teams Wednesday, Thursday, then play Friday, practice Saturday and play Sunday, Monday. So it's quick. You have 2 practices with your teams, and then you're playing a match. So it's really about kind of what team gels the fastest and connects the best. But yeah, so it's exactly like that. We start with number 4, but 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Awesome.
Draft until we get through 44.
Okay. So Cassidy, you have different teams every week. I mean, you call it a league, but the teams change all the time, and different players on different teams. So you're not really following the team like you said earlier. You're just following the athletes.
Yep.
So is it a league, or is it more in a season, or is it more of an event that Athletes Unlimited really is?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can think about it the way that you want. I think like we call it a league, and I'm sure there are all kinds of sports that have different types of leagues. Obviously, it's not the traditional model with teams in different places and or teams that stay stable throughout the season. So maybe it's more akin to some other sports where they have like more individual sports where they have more fluidity. But yeah, I mean, I think to us, it's like the most important thing is, that we're a league that lasts a certain amount of time, that we pay, regardless, that everybody is getting that base salary. So it's not only coming in and getting prize money, but they're getting paid to play no matter what. And they're guaranteed that. And then beyond that, whatever you want to call it, you can call it.
Bob, can I go back a minute? I hate to backtrack here, but you've got me hooked now.
Great.
So
Love
give me an idea of a drafting strategy. I mean, what are the strategies? I mean, people need to know what they're looking at so that they can really get into this. You know, if you play fantasy football, there are strategies on who to draft, and you know, our whole family did fantasy football because the grandkids are into it, and so we all got raked into it. Well, we don't like to lose, and the 12-year-old's beating the heck out of me, so I'm trying to learn strategies in fantasy football, but maybe I want to learn strategies with UA. If I'm going to watch this for 6 weeks, I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. AU, Mick.
AU.
What did I say?
UA.
Okay, sorry, I got it wrong again.
We thought we had it all figured out, Cassidy.
That's just from college coaching and using university athlete for years.
There you go. You got it.
Yeah. So with AU, the draft is fascinating. Everybody has a different way they go about it. But the way I like to think about it to start with is, what is the most rare thing? And so, for example, if we have 4 starting setters and they're all great, and you don't mind, you know, which setter you get, then that person's going to drop in your draft order. If there are only a few, you know, big arms available, or only a couple passing outsides available, then they're going to go up in your draft order. And so you're really looking at, you know, what's the most rare thing, and then also looking at kind of what everybody else is drafting, because again, for example, each team has 1 libero, and we have a quota, so you have to have 5 pins on your team, you have to have 3 middles, you have to have 2 setters and 1 libero. And so once the other 3 teams have selected their libero, you're going to get the 4th libero. So that should be essentially your last draft pick is your libero, because they're going to default to your team regardless. So you're really looking at that kind of combination of, you know, what's rare, you know, what are the pieces that I need to get early, and then what are the other teams doing? So if everybody else has selected their starting setter, if everybody else has selected, you know, whatever position, then I'm going to start thinking about, you know, the other ones moving up in my draft order. But it is really fascinating, and some of it is based on, you know, who connects best. And so the way that we do it that I really like is, you know, we put all of our athletes in a Zoom room, and then the 4 captains are with their coaches in kind of breakouts. And as soon as you get selected to a team, you get sent into that room. So if I select you in the first round, you're going to come into my room, and then we're able to talk about who we want to get next. So that, you know, if I'm getting my middles, I can say, hey, which setter do you connect with? Which setter do you not connect with? So that the team is kind of building itself as it goes. And a lot of it is just about that connection. You know, you can have the best hitter, but if they're with a setter that can't set their ball, then it's not gonna work. So it's a really fascinating process. Every single draft, somebody makes a decision, and I'm like, why would you do that? And sometimes it turns out badly, and sometimes it doesn't. Like, there were a couple teams last season that got picked, and I was like, that team is terrible. And they would end up, you know, going out and doing pretty well on the weekend because, for whatever reason, you know, their style of play clicked, and vice versa. There were some teams that were incredible on paper, and they just couldn't connect and ended up not doing well. So I think, to me, it's like, you know, a sports fan's dream. Like, this is the conversation we all have. How many times have somebody been like, what's the most important position on your team? Is it your setter? Is it your, you know, all around pin? Is it your libero? And in the draft, you get to see what people think is really valuable.
So 2 questions, additional questions. This is fascinating, and I love it. Do you televise the draft each week?
We did in the previous 2 seasons. We aren't currently. If somebody comes out and sponsors it, like that's what I think is most important. If we get a big sponsor, we'll start producing it again. But we were streaming it live on like YouTube and Facebook in the past couple seasons.
See, that seems to me to be the backstage thing, that you get the peek behind the curtain and see what's really going on, what people think, and all of that. That would be great. The second thing I'm wondering is, that's an awful lot to put on the individual player to try to be playing and winning these bonuses. So I saw something about facilitators. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's what we call our coaches. So we do have, you know, 4 coaches, 1 for each team. Dave Rubio is one of our coaches this season. Caleb Banworth is one of them. And so the reason that we call them facilitators is because they don't necessarily have the authority that a head coach would. So what I always like to say is that they're sort of a really high level assistant coach. They'll help run practices, they'll help manage the team during games. They do everything a coach does, but the captain technically is able to veto those things. So I like to tell them when we're trying to get them on board, like, you're a really high level assistant for a head coach that's very knowledgeable and also might flake out at any given moment. Your athlete, your captain might turn to you and go, what are we doing right now? Because they're not used to that role, right? And we have some, veteran captains who know exactly what they want to do. And here's the lineup I want to put in, and I want to call a timeout right now. And we have some younger captains who say, I don't want it. Like, you do it. And so it's just a collaborative kind of relationship with that player and the rest of the players in the team. But that's what we call them, facilitators. But they are helping coach. They're helping manage the team and giving their input to the captain, so that captain's not having to manage everything on their own.
All right, Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had to get to the bottom of this. I'm fascinated with trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
Well, and it was interesting that you had mentioned coach, and I was going to ask the same question Mick said, because you advertise as a facilitator, though you used the term coach as they were drafting. So when the captain and the facilitator get their first player, then there's three of them in a room, and then they communicate to who's going to be the fourth person.
Yep.
But ultimately, the captain has to make that decision unless they relinquish it to this facilitator.
Yes. Yeah. The captain's making the ultimate decision and just taking input from the rest.
All right. Well, changing gears a little bit. Here we have Athletes Unlimited going into their third season. All right. We also have PVF coming into their first season here in January. Love or League One, however you want to refer to them, we're not really sure when and if that's ever going to happen. But talk about your relationship, with these other groups, because you do have about, if I'm counting correctly, 32 of your 44 athletes are planning to move on to PVF in their inaugural season. What's your relationship with both those organizations and even pro leagues, in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited about the new U.S. leagues. So our season used to be in the spring. We moved to the fall because of our deal with ESPN, and so that worked out really well because PVF and Love, I think, both want to be in that spring window. And so, I think it will be really hard to have a professional league in the U.S. right now that goes in the full 7 to 8 month window that the overseas leagues do and covers that kind of whole cost of a player. But between the two of us, we can really cover that window. And, our players now are going to make as much or more than they do overseas. So we're happy to have, more opportunities for our players in our off season. So they can come play for us in the spring, compete together, and then they'll all go off on kind of different teams in PVF, and or Love in the future. In the spring season, and same for overseas. So in the past we've had that happen with Puerto Rico or other international leagues. Players have played in China and then come to us. So I think there's all different combinations, and it's one of the benefits of having the sort of short season that we do is that we can kind of bring in a bunch of the best players and have them play together in this kind of intense short competition, and then they can go off to their sort of traditional professional leagues, either here or abroad.
Doesn't that cause a potential problem though? The PBF has said they're going to play January through May or middle of May. We've read that League One has announced they're going to have a full season. I'm not sure what that means, but that would mean to me like October through, like you said, 7 month season, like October through May. Nobody can go beyond May 15th if they're going to work with the FIVB. That's our understanding. I assume you guys work with the FIVB too to make sure that you get their support. But it looks like we're running out of room for these events if this happens. Have you guys have discussions with both of these these groups as to that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I think, obviously Love or PVF starting in January is not a problem for us. Love, I think, also is not going to overlap. I think they'll start their preseason, I believe, in November after our season is done. So their players will also be able to play in our season and then go to their teams in their preseason in, I think, mid to late November. I believe they're planning on mid to late November 2024.
Well, Cassidy, we had a viewer Mick, I think it was the last 2 weeks from, I'm assuming they were from Puerto Rico. I don't know that they were, but were asking us questions about all these pro leagues. Is it going to destroy the pro league in Puerto Rico? And then we had heard that the Puerto Rico was going to move to the fall. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't. We get a few players from Puerto Rico in our league that also, some of them are also going to be playing in PVF. Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge to find time for the Puerto Rican league and which window they're going to fall in, or if they do something, over the kind of winter December time period. But yeah, I mean, they've traditionally been in that spring window. So I think a lot of the players that are going to be playing in PVF or Love are the ones that may have been going to Puerto Rico in the past. So I haven't heard what they're going to do in the future.
So we saw that you had an injury in the first weekend of play.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever wants to see anybody get hurt, and but it's it's something that just happens in sports. It happens in every sport. If somebody gets hurt in your league, are there insurance policies and things like that when they sign contracts? Are the players taken care of in that manner?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have insurance. The players obviously also have insurance, but if theirs doesn't cover it, then ours will, or we'll pay. And so she'll stay in rehab with us as long as she wants, and then if she needs surgery, we'll get that probably at home, but where she needs to get it. And so, yeah, definitely we want to take care of our players.
Like there was a question that Mick had asked in our planning session. I'm going to steal it from you, Mick, because right. I'm really interested in this one too. What do the players really like about Athletes Unlimited?
Yeah, great question. A lot of things, honestly, and I could say that as a player, and then obviously in my role now. I mean, I'll start with, I think, again, especially this season as we ramped up, that it is a really high level of competition. Like we've gotten to a point now where, I would say it's at the same or higher level probably than France or Germany overseas. There's probably a couple leagues that are higher in terms of the talent, but even in those leagues, it's really only the top teams. If you see like the Turkish league, for example, which is maybe the top league in the world, but it's really their top kind of 4 or 5 teams, and then it drops off from there. So I think the talent level is pretty high. So they're getting to play good volleyball. Like I said, the intensity of the competition, it's just really fun to play, to play hard every night. The community. So it's interesting because people they want to paint us as this kind of individualistic league. When, like I said, team wins matter a lot. So you get under your team and I had teams in AU that after 2 days of practice, those, I felt as close to those teams as I did to, my teams in the past that I was with for, months and months at a time. But it's also this kind of incredible entire community because you're playing with and against all of these players. And so our roster, rather than feeling like, 44 opponents, really feels like you have, 44 teammates who just happen to be playing against each other and wanting to, crush each other every night. So it's a really great community. And then I think, one of the biggest things is just the way that the league treats the athletes. that they're treated like human beings, that we do take care of them, that we recognize that they, are, value and things that they care about beyond that. Them who they are. And so I think that's something that has been missing from, definitely the teams that I played on overseas, but just.
So let me ask a question. Let's say I'm the coach of the national team. It seems to me that I might want to support this and have this 44 group of athletes as my pre-national team players. Is that in fact happening, or is it just something that might naturally show up, players wanting to play together like that? Because you brought out a really important part of every coach, every fall in college, for instance, you go through trying to get your team unity, trying to get everybody on the same page, that sort of thing. It seems like if you're playing in UA, yes, AU, yeah, you're playing in AU, sorry, that you already are getting that camaraderie because you're playing with pretty much all of the 40 players at one time or another. They're intermingled. So do you just perceptively think that this could be a tremendous advantage to our USA Olympic team?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope that those players, end up here. It also is just nice if they're able to play with us in the fall and then get a little bit of a break maybe between that and an overseas season or a PVF or a Love. Because like those players are going year round all the time and playing. But I think getting them there and playing all together is a great thing. Just it's a whole different kind of environment and different feel from, the national team. But my vision for kind of AU in the future is, becoming really the world championship at an individual level for volleyball. So we have the national teams competing on the international stage. We have club world championships. But the great sports debate is always, who's the best? Is it LeBron? Is it Steph Curry? Is it Giannis? And so what we can do in AU is get, really the top level players, put them with and against each other in different combinations on these teams and really count up, like, this is the person who is the most valuable. And so we saw it in season 1 with Jordan Larson and Sheila Castro, who's, iconic player from Brazil. For the first time, you're seeing them on the same side of the court. And that's really exciting. And so I think that's my vision. And I hope that that's, a lot of our Olympians are in that mix. And so I think it can serve kind of both purposes, where they're coming and they're playing at the highest level of volleyball, which obviously is also great for our national team. They're playing with and against the best players in the world, but they're also having the opportunity to, play with their teammates and build those relationships with their USA teammates.
Has AU had the discussion about paying at that level? If your example was Steph Curry, LeBron, we're talking 250 million there, but you're talking 20,000 right now. Will there be an upgrade in pay if the league goes? And where does that come from? Does that come from TV, or does that come from sponsors? What would that come from?
Yeah, I think we have sort of the vision for, each year how we're trying to progress towards that. The best volleyball players in the world right now aren't making 250 million. They're making hundreds of thousands though. Like, it is, significantly more than where we're at. The advantage we have is that, we need to cover a couple months of that and not the 7-month season. But yeah, I think we're, prepared to hopefully, in the near future, pay for the athletes that we want or need, in order to become that sort of competition at the highest level.
Well,
okay.
we want to thank Cassidy for coming on. I know she's really busy, Mick. She's got to go to an event this evening in New York City. Basically, giving some recognition to Athletes Unlimited in the Women's Sports Foundation for what they've done with their league moving forward. I think what Cassie's answer was that they have some some athletes currently in, international athletes on their teams right now. And I think it seems that, with her vision, we're going to see more, and that's going to make it a great league and great competition. So, Cassidy, we'd like to thank you very much for being on. Sorry, we had a little bit of technical difficulty there just near the end. But best of luck with the season coming up. I know you're just going into the second week now, and we wish you the best. Okay, Mick, let's just chat a little bit. I mean, she's pressed for time. It was really great that she was willing to come on. With everything that's going on right now with the recognition that the league is receiving up in New York City. What's your thoughts? I mean, you seem like you feel like you've learned a little bit about their program, and what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I have a much better understanding of what they're trying to do. I'm not sure yet. It's a spectator sport unless you make it into a little bit of a, I don't want to say soap opera, but you want to know behind the scenes who wants to play with who doesn't want to play with whom. All of that stuff would be fun. But they have a shrinking time period, and she was right. If FIVB decides to run a World Championship in October or November, it shrinks that block of time in which they will have to run their league. And that's interesting. I thought the pay was going to be much higher than $20,000. She said that's kind of the average, some higher, some lower, but $20,000 is minimum. I guess that's okay for 6 weeks of the work. I thought she would say, as a player, it's really fun just playing with 43 other athletes and playing with different teams and seeing what you can create. That would seem to be my instinctive feeling of why I'd like to be involved with that, because I'd like to play with the best players I could play with and get to know everybody and that sort of thing. And that'd be fun for the players. I don't know that it's a spectator event. And I don't necessarily agree that we follow just certain players. But there is some, when you think of the national team, you think of Jordan Larson, right?
Right.
When you think of certain collegiate teams, though, you don't think necessarily of one player. You think of several players. So the jury's still out in my mind if this can be a spectator event and if they can get enough sponsorship and television time through ESPN to do this. They do 4 sports, though. She did say 4 sports. And so this is not just volleyball. This is 3 other sports they do this with. So it's either going to go as a 4-sport event every year, or it's not going to go, I thought you were right when you called it an event. I think it is a 4 to 6 week event that maybe we could look forward to every fall. But I do believe the pro leagues that are coming in, the 2 that have already indicated, and now we've got Puerto Rico thinking about going to the fall. At least that's the information we have. That would limit athletes from Puerto Rico who want to play in Puerto Rico playing in this event. So those were all my takeaways in listening to what Cassidy had to say.
Well, I think my takeaways are, there is room for a lot of different, pro volleyball entities, though it's gonna become competitive for all of them. It seems like Athletes Unlimited are doing their best to structure their program so that these other pro leagues could benefit from that. For example, maybe the Puerto Rican league, if it goes in the fall, the kids in Puerto Rico stay there and they play in Puerto Rico, but then after that season's over, they move to the PVF. All right, where the U.S. kids might be staying with Athletes Unlimited, and with the addition of maybe some of the top international players, then they go back to their pro leagues in Europe, and the U.S. players go to PVF or whatever the league they decide to play in after that. I think from a national team standpoint, Cassie's vision, that was the first time I heard Cassie, even though it was the second time she was on our show, first time I heard her talk about the vision that way, or at least I understood it, where she really wants to see the best players in the world together competing and finding out who is the best of those.
That's only going to happen if they pay. There's only so many jumps and so many swings. And she was suggesting, I thought, that maybe they would only play in her league and not play in the other leagues and rest their body until they play with the national teams of their countries. But think about this. We have 650 Americans playing overseas in various levels of leagues. Only our best athletes are playing at the top levels. If we have, and when we talk to PVF, they talk to us about 14 teams in their league.
All right.
They were talking about a 14-team league. LOVB or Love or League One, whatever they were calling themselves, haven't really talked about that, but there's been mention of 6 teams. So that's 20 teams. Say you take 12 to 15 players on a team times 20, that's 300 players. What happens if there are not enough players to fill that? We talked about one thing. We talked about the draft. When we interviewed PBF, they said they're going to have the draft at the Final Four in December, and they're going to draft college graduating players or college eligible players into their league. What happens with those other players? Could it be that eventually the pro leagues will just be handling the whole year, meaning 7 months or so, and would all of the college players then matriculate who wanted to continue to play into this kind of an event that they have, Athletes Unlimited? It could go the other way on them. I'm not sure that would serve their purpose, but it certainly would serve the players' purpose. That's just a thought to throw out there also.
Right. I mean, I think it's exciting, and I'll go back to when we started the show. The exciting thing for me, being a volleyball player forever, was walking into a commercial establishment and seeing, women's volleyball right up there on the television, along with all the other basketball and football and everything, all the other sports that were on those big TVs. It was disappointing that this individual changed the station on me, but I thought it was great that it was on there, and there was obviously somebody that was interested in looking at it, because I put it up there for at least a portion of the time. So those are good things for volleyball. And the other thought that came to mind as Cassidy was talking about how close these players get, and it's even though they're competing against each other, head to head, night after night, but then all of a sudden they're on the same team and they're working together. It kind of gave me a flashback of the team that you were coaching back when I was coming out with the national team. We had the first team and the second team all in the gym. It had to be 50 athletes in that gym at one point. Of course, the first team would train, and then we would get on as the second team, and we'd be training the younger guys, and there was interaction between the two. And to this day, I still have friendships with a lot of those people that I met for the first time in that event. And it kind of seems like that's what's happening with, Athletes Unlimited, at least from Cassie's perspective.
One of the questions we didn't ask would be interesting is, if I'm an athlete, am I going to lobby that committee of 5 to try to get an invitation, or is there going to be a tryout for me to get an invitation? I don't think they're that far along, but I could see if it became a really valuable tool for the athlete to be seen in that league. Boy, whoever's sitting in that chair of 5 is on the hot seat for selection. And it would be interesting to see how that's going to turn out.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I mean, when they first started, I could see how it was more organic. 4 or 5 players got together and said, listen, we want to make this league and let's get the best players in. And now we're in the third round of this. It could start to get pretty political, I guess, going into year 4.
You always worry about that. I mean, you look at the politics in our country right now, for crying out loud. If we won't know if we have anybody that's not being pursued for jail sentence running for president here pretty soon. So I don't know what's going on, but it all trickles down. So I think there's going to have to be some advanced thinking on how that goes. And I would think a tryout is the most fair in some cases. So down the road,
I don't know if you could ever get pro athletes to come and try out. I mean, if they've gotten to that level, they're not going to come for a tryout. But it is interesting, to think about how that's going to keep evolving as they move along. I think that is something that they're going to have to look at. Whether facilitators will help them or not. Yeah,
you've got agents that want to lobby for their players. You've got all kinds of things that could start to happen. So, and it's like we said, well, that can't happen now. We're seeing it all now, and there's going to be more. I mean, all the way from the collegiate system to the club system up through all of this stuff. I'm surprised in anything that happens right now.
All right. Well, to close out our show, Mick, let's just talk a few minutes about our college transfer showcase. It's going to be held on Saturday of the AVCA convention. We're hoping that it'll be up on the AVCA at the net next week, advertising that. It's going to be that Saturday morning, 10 to 12. It's $145 for any athlete, any female athlete that wants to come and show their abilities. Last year, we had 117 college coaches that were in attendance for that event. Of course, it's free to anybody, any college coach that's at the AVCA convention. And it'll be being held there in Tampa, this December.
2 things. Division I athletes have to have entered the portal to try out in this. Junior college athletes don't have to have been in the portal or anything. They can just try out, come and show their skills. Foreign athletes can come and show their skills. That's all the same. And you've contracted a hotel at a reduced price to
right.
make the cost of this event much lower than it needs to be. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's the Barrymore Hotel in Tampa on the Riverwalk. It's a beautiful hotel. We have a discounted rate. It's $145 per night. It's a great location. We have shuttle service to the convention center and back to the hotel. I think we have 50 spots open in slots in that hotel right now, and athletes should just go ahead and register now, because we actually have a registration policy where there's a full refund up to a month before the event. So they should go ahead and register right now as if they're thinking about transferring, or if they know they're going to be transferring, and they should also go ahead and make their reservations, because the reservations can be canceled up to 48 hours before they actually show up.
And then that's as many rooms as we could procure right now, but there could be more people than the 50 spots that we have available in the hotel and for the tryout. So I think what we wanted to say here is that we want to encourage people to get registered as soon as possible, because it's really important for the planning. We had so many coaches come last year looking for athletes that they wanted to invite to their teams that really means that we have to do our preparation and really be ready for a large group.
Okay, just real quickly for our viewers, hopefully they enjoyed the show today. That's kind of round things up for our pro segment. Next week we're going to actually start exploring the collegiate game again. We're midway through the conference play, and we're going to go ahead and look at all 4 of the different polls, how they're constructed and how they're put together. And we're going to have some guests that'll be actually speaking specifically to their poll and why teams are ranked where they are.
Lee Feinswag from Volleyball Magazine has already agreed to be on, Bob. So he's excited there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's always fun to have Lee come on because he shoots off the hip and he's pretty good at it. Well, we'd like to thank all our viewers for tuning in again, this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.